So I think for 5 minutes, Yuta is going to be the absolute strongest character we've ever seen in Jujutsu Kaisen. In this video, I'm going to explain why, as well as Yuta's new ultimate move that's gonna make him stronger than both Gojo and Sukuna. In the end of the video, I will also give my thoughts on Gojo's comeback as Yuta and why I think it's so controversial. Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 261 was an extremely anticipated chapter. At the end of the previous chapter before that one, we saw Sukuna sense some kind of shadow figure who kind of looked like Gojo, and he said that those eyes are unmistakable. And literally everyone went kind of crazy that could Gojo actually have come back. There was a lot of theories on exactly how Gojo could have come back, or even if Sukuna is just imagining things. But in chapter 261, we finally saw that it really was Gojo. And I have to say, my mind was completely blown. First of all, no one at all predicted that Yuta was gonna take Kenjaku's curse technique and use it to switch into Gojo. We know Kenjaku couldn't quite switch into 6 Eyes users for whatever reason. And there was a lot of people who were speculating that maybe Yuji ate a part of Gojo, and I kinda thought as well. However, he still wouldn't have the 6 Eyes. And for the same reason, we knew that Yuta couldn't really copy Gojo's curse technique because it doesn't have the 6 Eyes. But in one of my previous videos, I talked about how Yuta is actually for sure alive. And this was simply because we saw Rika hold Yuta together, and I had talked about how Rika can use reverse curse technique of her own. So I knew that Rika immediately started healing Yuta, and Uyi also came and immediately took Yuta to Shoko, so he was almost certainly still alive. I didn't expect him to come into the fight already, especially not the way he did. Like, no one really predicted this, and for one big reason really. There was a lot of confusion behind Kenjaku's death. Like, I didn't really want to believe it, and many people didn't want to believe that a character like Kenjaku would literally go out in some kind of gag fight, because he was like one of the best villains in anime really. So to see him go out like that was a little anticlimactic. Personally, if he was gonna go, I would have preferred to see him have like a big huge fight against Yuta where they're both like at full power. That's the fight that was kind of foreshadowed, but then Yuta kind of sneaks up on him. The two big things that were revealed in this chapter, unfortunately. First is Kenjaku is probably gone for good. Second, even if there was a chance that Gojo could have still been alive, or whatever was going on with Gojo, we're kind of getting confirmation now that he's dead for sure. They even said in this chapter that, hey Gojo, if you die, can I take over your body? Yuta literally asked this to Gojo. I think we're finally gonna see Sukuna try his fire arrow against Gojo. And you could obviously argue that Yuta shouldn't be as masterful with the limitless curse technique as Gojo was. But the thing with that is he has all of Gojo's experiences and memory. So even Gojo's muscle memory, Yuta should have now. And he should just know how Gojo does all this stuff that Gojo does. And that's how he's able to immediately use Gojo's domain. As well as all the crazy advanced stuff Gojo was doing with the domain. Not to mention that Yuta is an insane powerhouse himself, and he's even better at some things than even Gojo is. So I think this is basically like Yuta plus Gojo. It's not just Gojo versus Sukuna. It's like if you plus Yuta's power to Gojo's power. As we saw, Kenjaku was able to use Yuji's mother's curse technique. On top of the fact that he was able to use his own curse technique, and obviously Gito's curse technique. So in this case, that would mean Yuta obviously is able to use Limitless, but Yuta will also be able to use his own curse technique, and maybe even his own domain. Like, how ridiculously broken is that? Like, he could mix in Angel's curse technique. Like, Yuta's own curse technique was already arguably the most broken curse technique in the entire series. He can copy anything, and his domain is absolutely ridiculous. So now we have a Gojo who can use Sukuna's abilities. The Dismantle, the Cleave, Teleportation, Flight, Purple, that neutral limitless barrier that is almost impossible to get past, and as well as the abilities of basically every character in the entire series. And as if this wasn't enough, there is one unstoppable ability, and I'm sure some of you have already guessed the ability I'm talking about. This is the first time in the series that there has actually been an attack that can realistically one-shot Sukuna if it lands. Sukuna and Gojo are basically relatively at the same level in terms of pure output and cursed energy. Obviously Gojo has infinite cursed energy, but Yuta might only have 5 minutes, so it doesn't matter that Gojo has infinite cursed energy. All that matters is that Gojo and Sukuna are basically on the same level. And now, Yuta has the abilities of every character in the entire series. Sukuna is at half power, if even that. And you have Yuji who's lining black flashes on Sukuna, who is also gonna continue to help Gojo. And you have Todo as well, who's teleporting Gojo around, more than Gojo was even doing on his own. Obviously Todo's teleportation is way faster, and just much better mid-fight than Gojo's long-range teleportation. And here's to name just a few abilities that Yuta should have. He's got obviously Uro's space manipulation, or sky manipulation, and he has the future sight, and let's not forget Kenjaku had more than one curse technique. So there's a chance that Yuta could have gained curse spirit manipulation, as well as Kenjaku's gravity curse technique. But maybe not, since those curse techniques were not really innate to Kenjaku. But those were not really going to be the abilities that put down Sukuna anywhere. Other than maybe someone with Gojo's cursed energy using anti-gravity. Like, you have to understand, all the curse techniques that Yuta has copied will now be amped up by the fact that they're being used by someone with the level of cursed energy output of Gojo. So everything is just gonna be so much stronger. Like the cursed speech, for example. Normally you can't use it on someone who is much stronger than you. It kind of like destroys your entire mouth, basically. And Yuta is able to use it on like super strong opponents because he's much stronger than Inumaki. But Gojo is even like another tier of strength above Yuta. So now Gojo could even use the cursed speech against Sukuna and tell him, don't move. And if Sukuna is stuck and he can't move, guess what ability Yuta is going to use to finish the entire fight right there. Yuta will finally give Sukuna a taste of his own medicine. The strongest ability in the entire series, at least in my opinion. The very same ability that once almost killed Yuta, and the one that basically finished off Gojo. An ability that Sukuna almost stole from Megumi can now be used against Sukuna himself. And literally, all Yuta has to do is say don't move with a cursed speech, and it should be over for Sukuna. So the reason why I think Yuta has the world cutting slash is quite simple. I've seen some people say that potentially Sukuna didn't use the world cutting slash on Yuta, but we saw him do the chants and everything, and Sukuna had even said that he can't really damage them critically with the regular dismantles, because Sukuna's output in his slashes had dropped to a really low level. I don't think there's any chance he could have one-shotted Yuta with one of those regular dismantles. And also, Sukuna had mentioned that he wanted to do the world cutting slash. So I don't know why some people are saying that he didn't use it against Yuta. And all that needs to happen is for Rika to test someone's blood in order to copy their curse technique. And since they were literally like ripping Sukuna's arms off and everything, that condition was for sure met. All that was left is for Yuta to actually experience the attack. And if it actually means that he had to get it from Megumi, then Rika also tested Megumi's blood at the same time. So either way, one way or another, I think Yuta is going to be having the world cutting slash now. And I don't see any way Sukuna can defend against that, especially if Yuta either uses the gravity on Sukuna or he just uses the cursed speech manipulation to tell Sukuna don't move. And if all else fails, I think Yuji is still willing to go down there and hold Sukuna down and make sure he actually gets hit by the world cutting slash. Obviously, I don't want Yuji to die. He's one of my favorite characters. But Gege did say that in the end of Jujutsu Kaisen, it was either going to be everyone dies and Yuji is the only one left, or Yuji dies and almost everyone survives. I believe Gege made a comment like that. So if the cursed speech doesn't work against Sukuna, there's always the possibility of Yuji actually making the ultimate sacrifice in order to defeat Sukuna. And literally, the only way that makes sense I can see Sukuna winning is if Sukuna is somehow able to get the merger and use it against these guys. But the conditions for that haven't really been met though. And obviously Sukuna can still just find another way to win. Like maybe take advantage of Yuta's inexperience in using Gojo's body or something like that. And I suppose it's also possible that Sukuna could just survive this 5 minutes with Yuta having Gojo's body. But we'll save all these other scenarios for my upcoming videos. Moving on, when I first heard that it's Yuta Okkotsu in Gojo's body, I was kind of shocked, and not in a way of like how amazing is that twist. More so like that's really dark and I can't believe Gege actually went there. This character, who was basically the most beloved character in the series by far, like Gojo has more favorites than every other Jujutsu Kaisen character combined. And it's not really just Gojo's power everybody fell in love with. It's Gojo's character and also what it means. Since a lot of people are kind of thinking like, oh, could Gojo actually come back? It was really weird for me to see Gege decide to bring Gojo back as kind of a husk of himself and basically just a tool to defeat Sukuna. So I was definitely kind of shocked and confused. I didn't know how to feel about it, but when I stop and look at it objectively, it's kind of an ingenious move that was basically unpredictable. And if you look at their situation, it also kind of makes sense that they would go for something like this, especially if everyone is losing and there's no other option. It's just as a Gojo fan, it's not necessarily how I would have wanted Gojo's comeback to be like. However, I think it's a lot more complicated than people realize. And I'm gonna do a video breaking down exactly what I think is gonna happen and is going on. If I'm right about that, it's gonna be one of my greatest predictions ever. So definitely follow if you wanna see that video when it drops. But that's all from me in this video, and see you in the next one.